All right, well, hopefully you guys can see this correctly. Maybe I'm upside down right now because I'm going to be hanging it. See if we can get this right here for you guys. And we'll go for a little drive. Somebody had asked for a point of view drive, and I want to give it to them. So I just dropped off some packages for you guys at the mailbox here at the post office. I've got one more package to drop off, so you guys are coming with me. This is a clutch, so hopefully we can go ahead and drop that off for one of you guys. They are on sale right now at the zgarage.net for $60 for a turbo clutch. So if you're looking for one, go pick one up. I have, I think, 11 more that I'm never going to use them, so go ahead and do something with them for me. And it's also a lot cheaper than I think most clutches you're going to be able to find for a stock turbo. One of my gauges actually fell down. Let me get this real quick. I'm waiting for some people to leave because I don't like how busy it is right now. I'm still shoving this right in here with a used mask, trying to keep it in this little area. All right, let's see if we can get out of here without too much problem. I hate having to back up on hills because of the burn out my clutch, but it's okay. Anyways, today what I wanted to talk to you guys about was the NA2T, because it is currently the holiday season, and this is the time when every person is going to be working on their Z and making it fast. It's the time that I did it last year, so I'm sure some of you guys are going to be thinking about doing it. So let me go ahead and go out right here. All right, let's see some turbo power, huh? It's a lot of fun, guys. So I know a lot of you are probably thinking about doing it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Why you would do it, is it worth it, and kind of how the approach you should be. Because I didn't get to take a lot of videos when I did mine last year, and I know a lot of you guys are interested in that. So I wanted to talk about, you know, when you first get a Z31, if it's an NA, which most of them are, it's kind of weird how you don't really see a lot of turbo Z31s. Even though that was kind of where it was at back in the day. You know, you get an NA Z31 and you think, you know, this is a great car. You know, the V6 power of the naturally aspirated, it's really good. You know, it's honestly a lot of fun. You know, I kept mine NA for almost a year and a half, I think. Maybe 2 years. Well, okay, it depends on how long, if you count if it was driving or not. You know, it was not driving for a while, and so it was stuck NA. But you know, the point is, you get a car and you like the NA power, but then you actually start driving it more and you realize how slow it is. And the best thing I can compare it to is if you've ever driven like a Toyota 86, Subaru BRZ, or the FRS, the Scion FRS. You know, those cars are just so much fun to drive because they're snappy and they're responsive. People say the handling is great. It's because the handling is great, you know, but they're just so slow. Every single person who drives one, you know, you love driving it, but it's just so slow. It kills you inside, you know. It's like going from one car that has power, specifically this car, you know, I put the turbo on this and then I go drive a FRS, and it's like this car, you know, you step on the gas and it starts pulling and pulling and pulling because of the turbo. On that car, it's kind of got good torque at the bottom end. You know, you start going and then it's just nothing and nothing and nothing. You're increasing in speed, but you don't feel like it. It's just a slow car. So doing the NA2T, it really just helps so much. So let's talk about the NA2T. In terms of, I'll try to break it down in terms of the fuel system, the air, and then just mechanical work on it. So let's talk about the fuel first. You know, I think a Walbro 450 fuel pump is the way to go. You know, it's got the amount of flow that you need. And then I use stainless steel 6AN lines all the way to the front. I've seen people adapt the hard line, and that's fine. I was having problems with mine blowing off fuel lines, which is why I went to the stainless steel so I could get the AN fittings. Let's see if this person will go. But you know, 450, that'll be fine for pretty much any basic power level you have when you're first doing the NA2T. You can always upgrade later. It's super simple. So going up to the front, we're going to use some fuel rails. And what I recommend is the Paulnet Allnets. He's on Facebook. He makes fuel rails for the VG30, and he makes them in 11mm O-ring and 14mm O-ring. The G35 injectors that I have, those are 14mm, and I would recommend trying to find something with 14 because it's going to have a higher flow rate. But it's just up to you kind of on what injectors you want to get and where you source them from. One thing that is nice if you get the more expensive injectors, they have like a full flow data sheet. It tells you how much the flow is, it tells you the latency, which is something you need to know when you're doing new NA2T tuning. If you haven't checked out my video, I have one on NA2T. I go over all that stuff, kind of what the basics are if you're going to be starting an NA2T swap. So definitely check that out. So I've got injectors up there, and then I have an adjustable fuel pressure regulator. These are one of the things you don't really want to skimp on. You know, the fuel pressure regulator is very important, making sure that your engine gets the fuel that it needs when it does. So you want something that's boost referenced, which most of the higher end models are. And then adjustable is where it's at too. So this is, I'm gonna turn in here for the UPS where we're gonna drop this bad boy off. But yeah, so for fuel pressure regulators, I went with a K-Power fuel pressure regulator. It looks like an Aeromotive, which, you know, a lot of people love, but I think Aeromotive is like, it's like $130 or something. And this K-Power was 70, which 70 is still a lot of money for something so small in my opinion. But you know, it's more expensive than like the $40 fuel pressure regulators that you'll find in a lot of places. So I really highly recommend getting something quality. I haven't had any problems with my K-Power, so I recommend that if you are interested in it. And then other than that, I just have a 6AN fuel filter that I have going up to the, or going in the feed line. Man, there's no place to park around here. I'm gonna come over here. All right. And then, you know, once you get that fuel filter in, you don't have to adapt to the original. This is reserved parking, so I can't park here. But that kind of finishes up the fuel system. So I'm gonna back up here. I'm gonna drop this package off, and then I'll talk to you guys more about the rest of the NA2T swap. Alright, well, it looks like UPS is closed, even though they're supposed to be open. So just a little tidbit, guys. If you ever have to ship anything in your United States, use USPS if you can, because it supports them, and they, if you guys know anything about them, they're severely underfunded just because of regulations. And also, UPS really sucks. You know, I've had problems with this store being closed all the time, the other store being closed all the time when they're supposed to be open. And then they crushed my package the other day. You know, it was in a metal container, and they crushed the metal container. So, but there you go, guys. That's your tidbit of I'm angry about things. So let's go ahead and get on with it. Let me back up real quick, and then we'll get into the air. One thing about these Z31s is they sure do have so much visibility. The back window, the way it's set up, because it's right next to the rear bumper, you can back up until it's pretty much touching your window, and that's where it is. All right. So in terms of air, you know, this is something, you know, a lot of people don't think about, but it's actually very important how you set up your system in order to get it to run properly. So what I recommend is just kind of getting a general intercooler. You know, Mishimoto is a great company. I'm never going to say anything bad about Mishimoto, but their prices for their stuff, it's incredible. They want, you know, $260 for, you know, an intercooler you can get on Amazon for, you know, $80. You know, and I'm not saying that their quality isn't lots better, but if I can get something that's going to work, you know, 90% of the same for 40% of the price, I'm gonna do it. So in terms of intercoolers, a 3-inch core, and then I think mine is 12 inches tall. I'd have to check on that, but it is a pretty big intercooler. You really don't need something like that for anything lower than, or anything around, I would say 300 horsepower. You could probably get away with one like the single, like row kind of style. But you know, I bought mine bigger because I like it. It looks cooler, and I think maybe in the future I'm going to try for higher horsepower. So it's just one of those things, buy for what you're going to want, not what you have right now. So, but yeah. So, in terms of intercooler piping, there's really not any bad ways to do intercooler piping. If you can, obviously using the high quality stuff, silicone joiners mostly is really what I'm talking about here. When I bought my intercooler piping kit, I did notice that there was some corrosion in one of my intercooler pipes. It didn't look like it was like corrosion necessarily because they're aluminum, they don't really corrode, but there was something in it. So make sure to look at your pipes, clean them out, because you don't want that stuff flying into your intake, especially if it's some sort of metal residue. It'll really mess up your cylinder walls. So make sure you clean out all your intercooler piping. But getting a general kit off of Amazon, you know, like $100 for a few straight pieces, a few corner pieces, and then a bunch of random silicone adapters, and then the clamps. The clamps are the one thing I'll say you really don't want to like necessarily skimp on them, because they break so easily if you get the cheap ones. I think I broke probably 4 or 5 putting my kit together, but that's kind of besides the point. So let me get over here real quick. Yeah, so for intercooler piping, sorry. Why would they get in the lane in front of me and then get back over? It just doesn't make sense. These people aren't driving well, guys. Drive better than this person. Intercooler piping. 2.5 inch is probably what you're going to want to use. And the reason I say that is because 2.5 inch will fit between your bumper and your radiator. So if you don't want to cut holes in your wheel wells like I did, and I didn't want to either, I just bought the wrong intercooler for that. You want an intercooler that has upward facing inputs and outputs, and then you want to take 2 pipes and go over the radiator to get to there. So if you do that, you won't have to cut any holes, it'll be fine. And then one thing, what is this guy doing? One thing I would recommend getting if you have extra money and time, because it does require a little bit extra money, is a Maxima intake from a VG30 Maxima. The reason I say that is because their throttle bodies face forwards instead of the Z31s, which is like towards the side, like in the back, and it hooks around. If you get one from a Maxima and it goes forward, you're gonna have to extend it just a little bit. Well, if you do that, you simplify your intercooler piping just a lot. So, you know, if you don't have to go like, because I kept my AC when I did mine, and so I had to go like between the AC and like the turbo to get back up around over to the throttle, and that was a pain in the butt. And it's also putting my intercooler piping right next to my header. So I went ahead and heat wrapped it in order to kind of keep some of that heat out, but it's heating up my intercooler pipe, which is not what you want. So using that Maxima intake, it'll let you kind of avoid that problem, so your cool air stays cool. So I really do highly recommend that if you have the time, because, and again, you have to extend it and it's aluminum, so you have to find an aluminum welder who will do that for you. But I have heard that the stock throttle cable will reach if you use it like that, so you don't really have to worry about it. I don't know about the cruise control. I have cruise control on mine. I don't know if it'll transfer over to the Maxima intake, but I would do a little more research on it if that was something you were seriously considering. I think the only other thing that I have for the air is talking about the Z32 MAF. You guys may have heard me say it a couple times before in the past. It's really the way to go in terms of reliability. For a 1986 ECU, all you have to do is undo 1 pin from a board in the ECU, and it drops it from, I think, an 8 volt to a 5 volt system, because most MAFs nowadays are 5 volts. So if you use a Z32 MAF and then do that, it'll work much better. But the Z32 MAF is just so much more reliable. It helps so much in terms of like trying to make sure your build is working and you have all your ducks in a line. So Z32 MAF is the way to go. I recommend that to people who are running stock systems, you know. So I think you can use a Z32 MAF without NA2T. If you take that pin off, drop it down to a 5 volt. But do not quote me on that. I would look more into it. I would ask some of the people who have done more research on that, because I just kind of asked around in the community. I said, what's it going to take for me to do this on my NA2T? And then, you know, I know in NA2T I can click on the 5-volt MAF. So that is something that I recommend to everybody whenever they have MAF issues with the Z31 MAF. I say just get the Z32. Never get tired of that. Alright, so we did fuel, we did air. In terms of spark, I have the stock ignition system. You know, I've heard people say you should drop it to 1 step colder spark plug, and I don't know what the NGK like nomenclature is for that, but it's like 1 or 2 numbers off of a stock plug in order to get it to drop down to that level. So I would do a little bit more research into that. If you're going to be making over 300 horsepower, which is probably what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to get some new plugs. I'll probably drop it down a step colder. I think that is almost everything. But I wanted to say in terms of scheduling, just in terms of mechanical work, give yourself extra time for things that you have to order. So, you know, when I went into my NA2T swap, I bought every single thing that I could ever think of that I would need. You know, I went through in my mind, I said, this is exactly how I'm going to set up the fuel system. This is every single fitting. I drew out the diagram to get from one place to another. And then I went and did it, and there was less space where I thought there would be space. There were bends where I needed bends to be that I didn't think there was going to be. There was just different stuff. There were different fittings that came with components that I didn't think that I was going to have. And so in terms of just like, I had to buy some new intercooler piping as well. I didn't have enough because I needed some more straight pieces because I just bought a kit originally. But I think I probably spent a good 2 weeks waiting for parts, especially if you're doing it right now around the holiday seasons. People are shipping things, and so all the shipping times are really, really increased. So give yourself some extra time for it. You know, don't count on your car being done in a week. You know, you're gonna run into problems, and if you wanted to go to like AutoZone or Pep Boys and get them now, you know, you can, but you're gonna be paying like 3 or 4 times the price for parts from a parts store like that. So, you know, it's up to you how you want to do it, but you know, I was on a budget and I didn't want to just blow it on fuel fittings that I had to go to the store, and the store was like half an hour away, so you know, I didn't want to have to go drive half an hour, find I needed another fitting, and then drive back, and then drive there, get another fitting, drive back. So it's really up to you. And what I did in that situation is I would work on one thing, I'd find that I need something else, I'd order it, and then I'd work on another part. So there's a lot of things when you're doing the NA2T that just kind of need to be done. So like the turbo cross member swap, you have to swap the cross members because the turbo sits in the way of the engine mount on the driver's side of an NA. So you have to swap over the cross member unless you're doing a relocation, in which you don't need to. But that's just something that can pretty much be done at any time. Mounting the turbo, that was another thing for me. You know, the one I got was from Black Horse Racing on Amazon. So they have a bracket off the side of their exhaust housing that comes up and it holds the wastegate, which is perfectly fine. But the problem was is that was hitting my frame rail where it runs right there. So what I had to do is I had to chop it, and it wasn't a problem. But it's just one of those things, you know, you go to put the turbo in and you have your engine hoisted up so that you can get the cross member out, and then you start dropping the engine down and you realize it's not dropping down just because it's setting on the turbo, and you don't want that to happen. There's just tiny little things like that come up. So what would I recommend doing in that case? Turbo wise, I would not recommend the HX35 unless you're going for big power and you're going to be doing a lot of boost. I think the HX35 is a great turbo. It's cheap, it's reliable, and it makes a lot of horsepower. But the problem that I've had with it is that it is very large, and that makes it very slow to spool, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it is for me because I'm not making crazy high horsepower, and so I don't need a huge old turbo like that. I could have gotten away with a smaller one that'll spool faster, and I'd be happier with it because I wouldn't have to wait, and it'd be more fun. Another thing that I've noticed with my HX35 that you guys want to take into consideration, and this was a very this took a long time for me to figure it out. So it was after I was actually done with everything, you know, I had gotten it all together and I was trying to drive it. I was getting a lot of oil in my intake and my exhaust, and that basically means that there is a lot of back pressure coming out of the turbo center section. So basically what was happening is I had too much uphill from the turbo to the oil pan. And what was happening is it was pushing back, and it was actually pushing out the seals inside the turbo itself. So I'm at UPS, but I'll talk to you guys about this real quick. So when you're building your turbo and you send it, all the 3 sections can actually spin independently of each other, just depending on how you want to go ahead and put it up there. So you always want the center section, which is where the bearings and the oil go. You want the input to be perfectly straight up, and you want the output to be perfectly straight down. The reason I say this is because, you know, if you get a turbo from an HX, like a HX35 for a Cummins diesel like I did, it was clocked a different way. And that's what it's called, clocking, is when you rotate a section. And I didn't realize that at first, and so I had mine sideways, and what was happening is instead of draining, it was just building up pressure and then leaking oil out everywhere. So you have to have it perfectly straight up and down, which is, for me, something I didn't know because I was a noob at it. So if you're an experienced turbo person out there and you're saying you're so stupid, how couldn't you know that? It's not something people really talk about all that much. You have to have the center section up and down, and it makes sense, but it's not something you think about. But on the bottom, it was almost at level with my oil pan drain. So what was happening is I had a 90-degree AN and then a 90-degree AN into the pan, and that was actually making it go up a little bit because of the way that it was angled. And so it was causing back pressure up into the turbo and still giving me problems. So I probably spent a good 6 or 7 times trying different combinations of AN fittings and different silicone hoses. And I did end up using a silicone hose. You know, it's rated for 400 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. So if I was you guys, I would probably try to get AN fittings, because silicone, you know, it's not perfect. But it's working and it's not leaking. You know, I check it all the time just to make sure. But if I were you, what I did is I bought a turbo oil pan. I chopped off the little like hose connection and then welded on a 6AN bung. The turbo oil pan and the NA oil pan are the exact same thing with the exception of that little bung. So what I would do is I'd get an NA oil pan and then have a friend measure where the turbo bung is and then drop it down about 1/2 inch or so, just so you can kind of get that little downward slope into the oil pan. I'm going to go ahead and drop this package off, and then I'll talk to you guys one more time. Alright guys, well that took about 1.5 years, and I honestly can't remember what we were just talking about. So, I'm going to go ahead and give my closing statement on the NA2T swap. Do I think you should do it? Yes. I think you should also probably give yourself a lot of time. You know, it's not something you really want to rush, because there's so many custom parts that you have to do to it in order to make everything work properly. It's really something you want to give adequate time to do. So have fun with it. Get parts that you think will be great. I've used solid motor mounts for mine, because I had to change out motor mounts when I swapped out the subframe, so I said why not do a solid motor mount. They're honestly not terrible. This is supposed to be one of the best engines you can use solid mounts with, but there's a little bit of vibration when you first start out. You know, sub 1200-ish RPM when you're in gear, it'll vibrate, but if you're at idle, not in gear, it's fine. And then I've also done poly bushing for the diff mount. I've heard that you should probably do poly subframe mounts if you do a poly diff mount, but that's going to be something in the future because it is a little bit of an involved process. What's coming up next for the Z is hopefully a Mega Squirt soon. I'm trying to get one of those done this winter. The reason is because I don't want to tell you not to get NA2T because it's a great affordable way to do it, but I had a weird alternator problem the other day, and what ended up happening is I guess it like sent a weird voltage to the ECU or something, and it corrupted the NA2T, and it bricked my ECU. So you know, in a normal car you could just go reset it, you know, reset the settings or whatever, or flash it again, But with NA2T, you have to send off the chip to a certified dealer, and that was a pain in the butt. You know, it took me 2 weeks to get it back to me, so I didn't have my car for 2 weeks. That's something with you know, like a Mega Squirt, you can probably do it on your own. They probably have a way to reflash the ECU if something gets corrupt, because you're not going to send in your whole ECU to do that. But NA2T, again, NA2T is a great thing for starting out. You know, if you're not making tons of horsepower, if you're just doing the NA2T, it's fine, and I recommend it. But oops, I'm in third. Yeah, Mega Squirt's coming up soon, so check out that, guys. It's gonna be super fun. I'm gonna try to do a DIY wiring install in case you guys want to save a few bucks and not get the wiring harness made for you already. Because I think it's like $400 or $500 to get the full assembled kit for you, or you can just do it yourself for I think $950. So definitely check out those videos when I get them done. I'm gonna try to do it as in-depth as possible, because I know I really dropped the ball with the NA2T last time. So this is something I want you guys to be able to follow really well if you want to do it. But there you go, guys. I'm gonna leave the camera on. You can watch me drive if you really want to. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe and have a great holiday season. And I hope you guys get some sick mods done on your car this holiday season. Well, it's a little bit cold while we're stuck home from COVID. Try to get some goodness out of it, and make a fun car. So there you go, guys. I'm gonna leave it there. still watching, I'm cutting you off. So you don't know where I live.